November 25th, 1177, the scorching desert of southern Palestine. A 16-year-old boy sits on a horse, his body ravaged by leprosy. His face is covered by a silver mask. His hands are wrapped in cloth to hide the disease eating away at his flesh. He can barely grip his sword. By all rights, he should be in bed, dying. Instead, he's leading 500 knights into battle. Against them, 26,000 of the most elite soldiers in the Islamic world, led by the greatest military commander of the age, Saladin. The odds are 50 to 1. Every military strategist would call this suicide. Every rational person would say retreat, live to fight another day, don't throw away your life and your kingdom. But this boy isn't rational. He's desperate, and he knows that if he doesn't fight here, today, there won't be a kingdom left to defend. His name is Baldwin IV. History will remember him as the Leper King, and what he's about to do will be called a miracle. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most incredible battles in history, a battle that shouldn't have been won, a battle where a dying teenager faced down an empire and emerged victorious, a battle that Hollywood couldn't write because it would be too unbelievable. This is the story of the Battle of Montgisard. To understand this battle, you need to understand Baldwin IV, because this isn't just a military story. It's a human story about courage, tragedy, and refusing to give up even when your own body is betraying you. Baldwin was born in 1161, the son of King Amalric I of Jerusalem. From the beginning, he was being groomed to rule. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was one of the Crusader states established after the First Crusade, a Christian foothold in the Holy Land surrounded by Muslim powers. Baldwin's childhood seemed normal at first. He was intelligent, athletic, good with weapons. His tutor, William of Tyre, one of the greatest historians of the era, personally educated him. Everything pointed to a promising future. But then, when Baldwin was around 9 years old, William noticed something disturbing. During playfighting with other boys, Baldwin didn't react to pain. When the other children pinched him hard enough to draw blood, he didn't flinch. At first, they thought he was just incredibly tough, but William knew better. He had seen this before. It was leprosy. In the 12th century, leprosy was a death sentence, not just physically, but socially. Lepers were considered cursed by God, unclean, untouchable. They were forced to live in isolation, ring bells to warn people of their approach, and were essentially dead to society. For a prince, for a future king, this diagnosis was catastrophic. William of Tyre later wrote, "It is impossible not to weep when telling of the young king's illness." But here's the thing about Baldwin. He refused to accept defeat. When his father died in 1174, 13-year-old Baldwin became king. Many nobles wanted to pass him over, to give the crown to someone else. But Baldwin stood firm. He was crowned King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, and he made it clear, leprosy would not stop him from being a warrior king. And he needed to be a warrior. Because the enemy at the gates was no ordinary threat, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. In the West, we know him as Saladin. By 1177, Saladin was already a legend. He had risen from relatively humble origins to become Sultan of Egypt and Syria. He had united the fractured Muslim states under his banner. His goal was clear: reclaim Jerusalem from the Crusaders and drive the Christians from the Holy Land. But Saladin wasn't just a conqueror. He was known for his honor, his mercy, even his chivalry. Even Crusader chroniclers, his enemies, wrote about him with respect. He was the kind of opponent who would send his own doctor to treat a sick enemy commander. Who would release prisoners without ransom because it was the honorable thing to do? But make no mistake, Saladin was also a brilliant strategist and a ruthless warrior when necessary. He commanded the loyalty of tens of thousands of soldiers. His army included Mamluk cavalry, Turkish horse archers, Egyptian infantry, and warriors from across the Islamic world. In 1177, Saladin saw an opportunity. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was weak. Much of its military force was away on campaign. The young leper king was inexperienced. The time to strike was now. Saladin assembled a massive army, 26,000 men. This wasn't a raiding party. This was an invasion force meant to crush the Crusader kingdom once and for all. His plan was brilliant. While the bulk of the Crusader forces were engaged elsewhere, he would march up the coast, bypassing the heavily fortified city of Gaza, and strike directly at Jerusalem. By the time the Christians realized what was happening, it would be too late. In November 1177, Saladin's army crossed into Crusader territory. They moved fast, burning villages, destroying crops, spreading terror. This was scorched earth warfare. Even if they didn't take Jerusalem immediately, they would cripple the kingdom's ability to resist. And then, Saladin made a mistake. Not a huge mistake, but in war, small mistakes can be fatal. He got overconfident. When news reached Jerusalem that Saladin's army was rampaging through the countryside, panic set in. Baldwin IV was in the city with only a small force. Most of his army was scattered. His best general, Count Raymond of Tripoli, was up north with the main military force. There simply weren't enough troops to defend the capital. The royal council met. The advice was unanimous. Stay in Jerusalem, defend the walls, send for reinforcements. Don't engage Saladin in open battle with the handful of men you have. It would be suicide. Baldwin listened to all of this, and then he did the opposite. He ordered every available knight to mount up. He sent urgent messages to nearby fortresses. Most importantly, he sent word to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were the ultimate warrior monks. Founded decades earlier, they were the special forces of their era. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they were also the most feared warriors in Christendom. They never retreated, never surrendered, and never asked for quarter. When Baldwin's message reached the Templar fortress at Gaza, the response was immediate. 84 Templars, led by their Grand Master Odo de Saint-Amand, rode out to join the king. Let me paint you a picture of what Baldwin's army looked like. About 500 knights total, maybe a few hundred infantry. Against Saladin's 26,000. And leading them? A 16-year-old boy so sick he could barely stay on his horse. His face was covered by a mask to hide his disfigurement. His body was wrapped in cloth. Every movement caused him pain. But he was there, and he was going to fight. The small Christian army marched south, following reports of Saladin's movements. They moved fast, traveling light, trying to catch up with an enemy that outnumbered them 50-1. William of Tyre, who chronicled these events, wrote, "The king, though weakened by disease, showed the courage of a lion." On November 24th, scouts brought news. Saladin's army had been located. They were near a place called Montgisard, about 25 miles from Jerusalem. And here's the crucial detail. They were spread out, looting villages, not expecting any resistance. Saladin didn't think the Christians would dare attack. Why would they? It would be insane. Baldwin called his commanders together. The situation was clear. They could retreat to Jerusalem and wait for the siege, or they could attack now while Saladin's forces were dispersed and vulnerable. The Templars didn't hesitate. "We attack," said Odo de Saint-Amand. "God wills it." Baldwin agreed, but he did something else, something that would become legendary. He ordered his men to bring forth the true cross. The true cross was one of the holiest relics in Christendom. According to tradition, it was a piece of the actual cross on which Jesus was crucified, discovered by Saint Helena in the 4th century. For the Crusaders, it was more than just a religious symbol. It was a source of spiritual power, a reminder of what they were fighting for. The Bishop of Bethlehem, Albert, had brought the relic with Baldwin's army. On the evening of November 24th, as the sun set over the desert, the entire Christian army gathered around the true cross. They knew what tomorrow would bring. They knew the odds. Many of them would die. Probably all of them would die. But in that moment, kneeling in the sand, they found something more powerful than fear: faith. Baldwin himself knelt before the cross. According to chroniclers, he prayed aloud, his voice clear despite his illness. "Lord, I am not worthy. I am a sinner, afflicted with disease. But these men, these knights, they are pure of heart. They fight in your name. Give us victory, not for my sake, but for theirs. Let us be your instruments." Then he stood painfully and addressed his army. "Tomorrow we face an enemy that outnumbers us beyond counting. Tomorrow many of us will die, but tomorrow we will show them that numbers mean nothing when God is on your side. Tomorrow we will show them that the kingdom of Jerusalem does not kneel. Tomorrow we will show them what it means to face Christian knights in battle." The Templars roared their approval. "Deus vult! God wills it!" That night they prepared. Armor was checked, weapons sharpened, horses readied. They knew this might be their last night alive. But here's something remarkable. Not a single knight deserted. Not one. They all stayed, knowing what morning would bring. Meanwhile, about 5 miles away, Saladin's army was celebrating. They had looted successfully, encountered no resistance, and tomorrow they would continue their march toward Jerusalem. Some chronicles suggest Saladin himself was so confident he had sent much of his cavalry on separate raiding missions. He had no idea what was coming. November 25th, 1177. Dawn. Baldwin's army moved into position on high ground near Montgisard. Below them, spread across the valley, Saladin's forces were scattered, many still in their camps, not in battle formation. This was the moment. If they were going to attack, it had to be now, before the Muslims could organize. Baldwin, despite his illness, despite the pain, climbed onto his horse. He wore full armor. The Bishop of Bethlehem rode beside him, carrying the true cross high so all could see it. The Templars formed the vanguard. These 84 knights would lead the charge. Behind them, the rest of the Christian cavalry. Behind them, the infantry would follow as fast as they could. Baldwin raised his sword. The army fell silent. Then he pointed the blade toward the enemy camp and shouted one word: "Charge!" What happened next is difficult to describe because it defies logic. 500 knights charged down the hill toward 26,000 soldiers. By every military principle, they should have been overwhelmed in minutes. But they weren't. The Templars hit the Muslim lines like a hammer blow. Their heavy cavalry, bred and trained for this kind of warfare, crashed through the scattered enemy formations. The Muslims, caught off guard, disorganized, unable to form proper battle lines, began to fall back. And then something happened that no one expected: panic. See, Saladin's army was huge, but it was spread out. Individual units couldn't see the whole battlefield. All they knew was that suddenly Christian knights were among them, cutting them down. They didn't know it was only 500. In the chaos, in the dust and blood, it seemed like an entire army had appeared from nowhere. Units started to retreat. Then retreat turned into rout. Soldiers abandoned their positions and ran. Saladin himself was in the thick of it. Chronicles say he fought like a lion, trying to rally his men, trying to form a defensive line. But the panic was contagious. His own bodyguard was cut down around him. At one point, Saladin barely escaped capture, fighting his way through Templar knights. And Baldwin, that 16-year-old leper king, he was there, in the center of the battle, sword in hand. William of Tyre writes that despite his weakness, despite the disease ravaging his body, Baldwin fought with the fury of a healthy man. His presence, his refusal to yield, inspired every man around him. The battle became a massacre. The Muslims were fleeing in all directions. The Templars pursued relentlessly, giving no quarter. This wasn't just a military victory. This was a statement. The kingdom of Jerusalem would not fall without a fight. By the end of the day, Saladin's army was destroyed. Estimates suggest that 3/4 of his forces were killed or captured, thousands of soldiers dead. Mountains of equipment abandoned. Saladin himself barely escaped with a small bodyguard, riding through the night back to Egypt. It was the worst defeat of his career. And the Christian losses? Remarkably light. A few dozen killed, maybe 100 wounded. 500 had defeated 26,000. The impossible had happened. News of the victory spread like wildfire. In Jerusalem, people couldn't believe it. In Europe, when word arrived weeks later, the Battle of Montgisard was hailed as a miracle, direct intervention by God himself. The true cross was returned to Jerusalem in triumph. Baldwin, barely able to walk from exhaustion and his disease, was carried into the city as a hero. For a brief moment, the kingdom of Jerusalem was saved. But here's where the story becomes truly tragic. Baldwin's disease didn't stop. It never stopped. Over the next few years, leprosy consumed him piece by piece. He lost the use of his hands. His face became so disfigured he wore his silver mask permanently. He went blind. Eventually, he couldn't even ride a horse and had to be carried into battle on a litter. But he kept fighting. For 9 more years, Baldwin IV ruled and led his kingdom through crisis after crisis. He fought Saladin multiple times, won some battles, lost others, but never gave up. In 1185, at age 24, Baldwin finally succumbed to his disease. He died, having never once stopped being king, never once surrendered to his illness. Saladin, to his credit, spoke of Baldwin with respect. In later years, when asked about his greatest opponent, Saladin mentioned the Leper King, saying he had never faced a braver enemy. The Kingdom of Jerusalem survived only a few more years after Baldwin's death. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin crushed the Crusader army. That day, the true cross itself was captured and lost forever. Jerusalem fell shortly after. But for those 8 years, that dying boy held back an empire. Against all odds, against all logic, through pure willpower and courage, Baldwin IV kept his kingdom alive. The Battle of Montgisard should be impossible. A 16-year-old leper leading 500 knights against 26,000 soldiers and winning? It sounds like fiction. It sounds like something from a fantasy novel. But it happened. It's documented in multiple sources, Christian and Muslim alike. It's one of those moments in history that reminds us that sometimes, against all odds, the underdog wins. But more than that, it's a story about refusing to accept defeat, about fighting even when your own body is giving up on you, about leading even when everyone says you're not fit to rule. Baldwin IV lived only 24 years. Most of those years were spent in agony. He knew he was dying from the moment he was diagnosed. But he never let that stop him from being what his kingdom needed, a warrior king. There's a reason the movie Kingdom of Heaven featured Baldwin IV prominently, even though he's not the main character. There's a reason historians still debate and analyze this battle, because it represents something fundamental about the human spirit, the refusal to quit. Montgisard wasn't just a military victory. It was a testament to courage in the face of impossible odds. It was proof that leadership isn't about being perfect or healthy or having advantages. It's about standing up when everyone expects you to fall down. 500 against 26,000. A dying boy against the greatest general of his age. And the boy won. That's the story of Baldwin IV. That's the story of Montgisard. And that's why nearly 1,000 years later, we're still talking about it. If this story inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more incredible tales from history. And drop a comment. What's your favorite underdog victory in history? See you in the next video.